Welcome and thank you for joining Raw's Reporting Fundamentals. Before
This conference is being recorded. Only the main conference is recorded.
Before we begin, please ensure you've opened the Zoom chat panel by using the associated icon located at the bottom of your screen. Please note that all audio connections are muted until the Q&A portion of the call. If you would like to ask questions, you may submit it by selecting Q&A icon from your Zoom window and ask your question there. If you require technical assistance, please send a chat to all panelists. With that, I will turn the conference over to Stephanie Adams. Stephanie, please go ahead.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. Great. All right, so welcome to the ROS Reporting Fundamentals webinar. This is the first in a three-part series, so we're excited to meet with you, engage in reporting, walk you through some expectations, requirements, resources available to you, all with the aim of just supporting your reporting and making our program stronger. So to start, I'd love to just do a quick refresh on who you have in your ROS head team. So my name is Stephanie Adams. I am the program manager for ROS, and alongside with Louis Dorman, he's my co-program manager. He's not able to join us on the call today, but he's, of course, a wonderful partner on the ROS team. We also have Dina. She is our project lead for ROS. Trey was previously a program manager, but he's now we're very excited to have him in the deputy director position. So definitely congratulations to Trey, and we appreciate your support as a deputy director in that new role. We have Joseph Taylor, who is our wonderful liaison with all things ONAP. So if you are a tribal grantee, you should be in contact with your local head field office representative through ONAP. If you don't know who that is, you're welcome to reach out to us in headquarters, and I would just reach out to Joseph, and together we could, connect you with who your local head field office representative is for ONAP. We also are very lucky to have Charles Eldridge and Janelle Jones on the Office of Field Operations side. For all of our public housing, for all of our grantees who oversee public housing residents, Charles and Janelle are the head of that group. They're the liaisons between us and ROS headquarters and all of the local head field office representatives who might help you with all those day-to-day questions that you might have regarding your grant. And then, of course, all of those local head field office representatives I just mentioned, they're part of the ROS team, and we're grateful to have all these folks on our team. So I'd like to pause and just take a moment and say thank you again for being on this call. And I'd love to hear who we have with us. So if you can, please enter into the chat. I'd love to hear your name, where you're from, the name of your grant, maybe your grant year. That would be great. We'd love to hear who we have with us on the call. So feel free to put that right in the chat. And yeah, well, folks are entering that in. I will go ahead and keep us moving right along. So I want to first just talk about the importance of reporting. Why is this something that we need to discuss? So reporting can help the ROS program in many different ways. First is that it can give you the tools to understand the ROS program, understand where your program is working well and where there might be gaps. You can see, who's accessing services, what services are translating into outcomes. All of these things can help you evaluate your program and just move it in the direction of making it stronger. So reporting also can help you with your match partners. As you know, we require a 25% match commitment for every ROS grant. And in order to get those commitments, it might be helpful for you to just demonstrate the benefits of the Ross program. And you can show from previous years, your match partners, you can demonstrate how the services they've provided, how the resources that they've given you are translating into outcomes and are moving the needle on self-sufficiency for the residents in your properties. So it's a great way just to demonstrate value to those match partners. It also reporting, and specifically the performance reporting in Grant Solutions, allows you to access your data in the Ross dashboard. So every year, whenever you input your data in Grant Solutions, after we've processed that data, our technical assistance provider uploads that to the Ross dashboard on HUD Exchange, and there you can see your data. You can really play around with it and look at trends over time. You can look at different types of services, demographics, data availability. The dashboard is a really extensive, comprehensive tool available to you, and you can make the most advantage of it by making sure that your reporting is timely and that you're sharing as much data as possible. Next, also, it helps us. It helps us help you, essentially. It helps us understand those successes and the gaps in your program so that we can come in and provide tailored technical assistance. If you're asking for assistance with your grant, we can understand where you are. We can understand, maybe questions that the reporting might ask that might be helpful to discuss together to just help make those resources that much more impactful that the service coordinator is providing. Next, importantly, is that this is a requirement in your grant agreement. It's part of being in compliance with the Ross program. So we do expect you to upload those reports timely and to collect this data and to share it through Grant Solutions. And then another point is that it's important for you to consider that we want to demonstrate not just to ourselves, but also to Congress that this program is working, this program is helpful. And so we need to be able to show that for our congressional justifications to demonstrate that this program is impactful and is something that's worth funding. So you can help us do that. You can help us accomplish all of these great things by staying on top of your reporting and really going the extra mile just to make sure that the data you collect is translating in those reports. Awesome. Oh, shoot. I think that my slide may have just frozen. Give me just a moment. Great. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, so we're on the next slide. All right, so here I want to look at the core functions of the Ross program through the lens of reporting. How does it relate to each of the core functions that you know so well that are just the milestones of the benchmarks of your Ross program? So first is that needs assessment. So the way that this can relate to reporting is that, as you know, there's a difference between active participants and, there's a difference between participants and non-participants. So only those residents who've completed a resident needs assessment count as a participant. And this is something that we ask in your reports. So just bear in mind that as you're completing these needs assessments, once a resident has completed it, that makes them a participant, and you'll need to indicate that on your performance report. Great. So next is coordination. A huge part of the Ross program is service linkage, right? And those partnerships, that's huge. So again, reporting can demonstrate how those match commitments are being put to use. It can help sustain match commitments. If you have a renewal grant, you can show the value of your program moving forward, and it can just demonstrate the usefulness of the resources your partners are giving. Case management. So reporting asks you to document services and outcomes, which is important to bear in mind. So this could mean ongoing meetings with residents to track individual client progress and to see what comes of those referrals that you give to residents. And also, please note that, case management, it is a core function of the Ross program, and you have the ability to use administrative funds in your Ross grant to purchase case management software. So I'd like to take a quick pause here, and Luke, our event producer, if you would so kindly open the first poll. So our first poll, we'd like to know, have you used Ross admin funds to purchase case management software? So we'll give you about 1 minute to submit responses, but we'd love to hear if this is something that you've used in your Ross program. And Luke, how are we looking with responses so far?
Looks like we have 75 yeses and 64 no's, so people are still answering out of the 217.
Okay, great. I might just give 10 more seconds and then we'll close that poll. So if you haven't already, please let us know. And all right. And Luke, if you don't mind closing that poll and sharing the results. Wow. Okay. Interesting. So it's really pretty split. So just over half would say yes, that they've used the administrative funds to purchase software, and just 49% have said no. That's really helpful for us to keep in mind. But again, that is an option that's available to you. And so I'd like to open our second poll. So this poll is specifically for that 51%, for those who have purchased case management software. Is it helpful in submitting reports? And Luke, how are we with responses now?
They're coming in really fast, so I will just give it like 30 more seconds.
That sounds great. Yeah, thank you all for sharing your perspectives. I think it's helpful for us to know, and maybe for your peers to see as well. So for those of you who have purchased case management software, is it helping? We'll give just about 10 more seconds. Great. And Luke, if you wouldn't mind closing that poll. Wow, that's pretty resounding, isn't it? All right, so 91% say yes, and we just have 9% reporting no. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. I think that's really helpful and demonstrates what I was expecting to hear, which is that it's a best practice to purchase case management software, and that, we're hearing from your peers, from Ross grantees, that those who have purchased it, it is overwhelmingly a helpful resource. And HUD doesn't endorse any one case management software program, but for those of you who said yes, who do have a case management software program, I'd invite you to put in the chat and let your peers know, what's the program that you use? What do you think has been a helpful program for you? We often get the question about, recommendations for software programs, which we at HUD can't provide, but, if you're willing to share, I think your peers would really appreciate hearing that. So that's great. We'll definitely speak more on case management software. I think this is a really key resource that we want to emphasize throughout this webinar. But I'll move on for now, and we can keep those comments coming in the chat, and we'll circle back to that a little later. So reporting and resident engagement. Here, I think that reporting is helpful because you can see who is accessing services and who isn't. You can see where your services are falling along demographic lines, around your hard to reach populations. Are you reaching those folks? Is your outreach successful? Are people coming to your office? And one of the possible outreach strategies, possible barriers that you could infer based on your reporting and what kind of demographics you're able to serve. And then lastly, evaluation. Of course, reporting is tremendously helpful in that respect. You can assess your goals, your key performance indicators. It's helpful for both you and us at HUD as we support you to strengthen your program. Okay, great. All right. Expectations for tracking resident outcomes. So in your NOFO, HUD does require that you develop performance and outcome milestones to support residents towards self-sufficiency. And it's important to clarify what we mean by self-sufficiency. This is the overarching goal of our program, and we define it as the household's ability to maintain financial, housing, and personal or family stability. It's important to note that self-sufficiency can look different for different populations. So for a resident who is work able, it might mean helping them get employment. For an elderly or disabled resident, it might just mean helping them to retain independent living. We really want to meet residents where they're at when we talk about self-sufficiency. So we also expect you to develop an effective, quantifiable, outcome-oriented plan. And we provide you with some tools with the areas of need that we outline in your NOFO, as well as the key performance indicators. And I'll also note on tracking resident outcomes that we expect you, we want to see you serve at least 50 residents each year. And just carry out that work that moves the needle on self-sufficiency and makes sense based on the areas of need that you identified in your application. Outside of that, you really have a lot of freedom to tailor your program to those specific needs in your communities. So I mentioned the areas of need. As you'll remember, these are outlined in your NOFO, and they are really just foundational items to kind of help guide your ROS program and help you identify what your community needs are and how you can tailor your services and your partnerships to address those specific needs. So please note that digital inclusion is a newer one. If for those who applied in FY20, you might remember that it was not on your 52768, your application form, but you were invited to pursue that as an area of need. And then, I'm sorry, for FY21, that was the case. And many of these others have stayed the same. So we have digital inclusion, education, elderly and residents with disabilities, employment, financial literacy, health and wellness, reentry, and substance abuse. And we'll go into, I will share that in another reporting webinar. We'll go in greater depth about data elements and how services can translate into your reporting. But for now, I just want to remind you that these are those areas of need that should be guiding your overall reporting. And in your NOFO, we have listed in depth some key performance indicators that align with the data elements in Standards for Success and can help you evaluate if you are, meeting successful benchmarks under those areas of need. So I won't dwell on these long today, but I would invite you to look back on your NOFO, look in the data guide, look at the data elements that are available to you, and see how they fit with the areas of need that are in your specific grant. And I'll just go back for just a moment to emphasize that any valid report should include all information that you collect and all services that are provided. So we want your program to focus on those areas of need, but even if you provide a service outside of your area of need, we still want to see that reflected. And also, as you're thinking about what it would look like to have quantifiable goals for your program, outside of Standards for Success, you can think about milestones like, maybe in your first year, you want to see, 10% more of your work-able residents who are full-time employment. Maybe in your second year, you want to see that increase to 25%. We encourage you to think about, outside of just the standards for success metrics that we require, you can, certainly think about what those goals look like and what milestones might look like with the key performance indicators and areas of need as guiding tools to help you shape that. Great. Okay, so sometimes we get these questions about what should be going in your performance report. And again, the performance report is standards for success report that's in Grant Solutions. So we want to see all three of these things for each resident: demographics, services, and outcomes. Many times we'll open reports and we'll just see maybe just demographics, or it might be empty. It might not have any of these buckets filled, but we really want to see all three of these to reflect the work that you've done with all the residents in that reporting year. So when and how should you collect data? Really, this happens throughout your grant term, right? So whenever you have a service coordinator has their first intake meeting with the resident, you can do that resident needs assessment. That's a great opportunity to get a lot of that demographics and to better understand, what resources the resident currently has and where there might be gaps, where there might be good opportunities to connect them with different services. Regular meetings and assessments. So again, case management is a big part of this program. So we do want to see you regularly meeting with residents, having that follow-up, learning from them what comes of those referrals that you give to residents. So ideally, we want you to meet with residents regularly and then collect that data and report back regarding what's happening. And you might be doing at different intervals, re-examinations or do an annual intake assessment, however you see it fit with the needs of your community. We also get questions about, what counts. So if I pass my resident in the hallway and we just make small talk, is that a service? And essentially, if you can ask yourself, did you move a service forward? Did that conversation help connect them in some way to a resource that you've been working on? And if you had a phone call or an email exchange in which you referred them somewhere or heard back the outcome of something, then by all means, that's something that we want to hear and we want to see reflected. That's you working with the client and moving that forward. I think especially as people are working more remotely in our current circumstances with COVID-19, I think some folks maybe aren't clear whether that is counted as a service. And by all means, if you're providing a service, if you're providing a referral, or you're moving the work forward, then we want to see that reflected in the data. And again, right, surveys, you might have regular surveys like those community needs assessment surveys, meetings with your service providers. You might have arrangements with them with de-identified information sharing to find out what were the outcomes of those referrals. So we certainly encourage you to collect data in that way. All right. So at this point, we've covered the critical role of data collection and reporting, and we've discussed HUD's expectations. So I'd like to pivot now and talk about challenges to reporting. So I would invite you to go to the chat and let us know and let your peers know what are some of the primary challenges to submitting ROS reports. We'd love to hear and engage with any of those challenges that you might see. Oh, great. I've opened the chat and okay, great. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We've got one that's resident honesty with their situation. Touching base with this and that, work. Remembering the timelines of reporting and what types of match letters are needed and when. Knowing exactly what HUD wants us to report. Resident reluctance to make changes. touching base with those at work. Yep. So maybe that follow-up, finding out outcomes, trying to do that while working around rigid resident schedules, if that makes sense. Time consuming when entering client level data, manually entering data. Yep. Knowing how to enter a service plan correctly so that reports come out correctly, time consuming, having to continue, reschedule often. Thank you so much, everyone. This is really great perspectives, and I think that's really helpful. I hear you on the time consuming piece. And on that, I'd really encourage those who haven't already invested in case management software to at least look into it, because many of these are designed so that you could do it in real time, and then your reports are essentially up to date, so you don't have to rush right before October 30th to try and get that information in. But thank you all for sharing those. It's really helpful perspectives. Okay, so I've heard a lot of those really great, insightful points about resident schedules, and the follow-up can be challenging, time-consuming. And here's a few others that I'll offer that I've heard through one-on-ones and through the Ross inbox. Oh, I apologize, everyone. I think my screen froze again. Let me just exit out real quick, and then I'll come back in. All right, let me try this one more time. Okay, thank you for your patience. Great, so one that I've heard is what many of you have mentioned, which is that you might give a referral and then you don't hear back from that resident. So it might be hard to hear back about outcomes, particularly if it's a hard to reach population, or if it's someone who is working and has a rigid work schedule. Another one might be that the reporting knowledge stays with one person, and once that person leaves, other people in the entity may not have access or may not know how to do the reporting. So maybe it ends with that person, and there might be delays or late submissions. And I'll just go back for just a moment. So for this first concern, which is you give a referral and then you don't hear the outcome. So I think our guidance would just be to think through targeted outreach for those hard to reach populations. Think about what it could look like, what your strategy could be to ensure that you hear that follow-up. Could you flex your hours? Could you institute some form of follow-up that's just helping you to make sure you hear what those outcomes are? Could it be an arrangement with partners to find out, information sharing if your resident did pursue that referral that you gave them? And for the second comment that I included here, with the institution, like maybe where there might be gaps in institutional knowledge and it might really reside with one person. So I'd encourage you to go back to your application where we ask for you to think through how your staff can support the program. Staff outside of the service coordinator can support the Ross program. And think about how you can incorporate that and implement that with a lens towards sustainability. Because it's important that you can build a sustainable infrastructure so reporting and data collection isn't dependent just on that one person. You can assign more than one person to a grant and grant solutions, for example, which we'll discuss in greater length later. But just keep that in mind and think through what that would look like to have broader support beyond just that service coordinator. Okay, great. So moving away from some of those challenges, I want to take a moment and just share some of the common errors that we see in HUD when we're reviewing reports. So one is that sometimes we'll have grantees that might wait until just a few weeks before October, to try to get all their data and report it then. So if you're waiting until the end, it's likely that you might run into some issues with grant solutions, or you might not have the most accurate data if you're trying to collect it all at the end of that reporting year. We'd really advise that you collect data in real time, and just to make sure that it's the most accurate and complete. Waiting until the last month to request access to grant solutions. So it can be, it can be a process that might require some back and forth. So you just want to make sure that you have access, you can get in the system well before that deadline. A huge one is personal identifiable information. So we don't allow PII in reports. And if you submit a report with PII, we will send it back and you'll have to remove that. And then if your report comes in after the deadline, it'll be considered late at that point. So it's really, really important that you just de-identify the data from the start, so that we don't have to engage in any back and forth, and we can just, get the final clean report once you submit it. Another one is missing responses to the data elements. So I mentioned earlier that sometimes we'll get reports and there'll be no data in the reports. It'll all be information not collected. There'll be no indication of services or outcomes. So we want to see, we want to have as much information as possible. We want as much data as we can work with for all those reasons we discussed in the beginning, to fully evaluate your program, to defend the Ross program, congressional justification, just so we can provide tailored support and understanding your program. For all those reasons, we really want as much data as possible for these data elements. And then the last common error might just be, missing opportunities such as these, the webinars that we offer, the data guide that we have on HUD Exchange. We have great resources available to you, and we want to make sure that you're reviewing those and you have access to those. All right, so moving away from challenges and errors, let's talk best practices. So one of the best practices, which we've discussed in depth, is using case management software. And for those of you who use case management software, please feel free to open up the chat, and I would love to hear from you. What has been the primary benefits? In what ways has it been really helpful to you? I'll pull up the chat and we can take a look and see. So the question is, in what ways is case management software helpful? Great, so it provides follow-up reminders, easy to gather the data once it's collected. It exports the data to Excel and makes it easy to upload to Grant Solutions, helps you keep track of data. Submitting reports in the click of a button puts everything in one place, one-click reporting. It has a symbol next to the information that HUD collects, so you know to include it. It's easy to submit. Easier access to client information and note-taking. These are great. Keep them coming, and thank you so much for sharing these insights. I think it'll be helpful for your peers. For those half that don't have case management software, I'd encourage you to consider these benefits as you think about your own reporting and any challenges you may have experienced to being able to submit those reports. Great. So case management software is definitely a best practice for reporting. In addition, we encourage you to develop strategies for case management and ways to track outcomes. So as I mentioned earlier, thinking about how you can ensure you get that follow-up. What does that look like? How can you target outreach or target those relationships, or structure them in a way that you can get the full information that you need for reporting? Maybe that means, not accepting walk-ins, but saying we have to meet I have to schedule this appointment in advance, and then you can block off enough time so that you can collect all the data that you need from that person in order to provide the service. Whatever strategy works best for you, but I encourage you to consider that. And then another best practice is to ensure more than one person at your agency is familiar with grant solutions and ROS performance reporting, to report in real time, which again, you could do on your own in Standards for Success, but certainly those with case management software, we're hearing from your peers that, it's possible to report in real time. De-identify data, again, personal identifiable information. We do not accept that in reports, so it's very, very important that you de-identify. And then lastly, we've mentioned that there's some really great resources available on the ROS HUD Exchange page. And it's a best practice to review those and to make sure you're familiar with them. And that'll help you understand the data elements and how to respond to questions in our reports. Oh man, thank you all for your patience. I think my screen has frozen again, so I'll just take just a quick moment. Okay, great. Thank you all. All right, so I want to take a moment and talk through Grant Solutions access. So you'll want to know who on your team has access to Grant Solutions, so that if you have staff turnover, you can make sure that there isn't a vacancy or there isn't a void and someone can get into Grant Solutions and enter those reports and access the information for your grant. So if you need to give an additional person access, what you have to do is you have to submit a user account request form to Grant Solutions. You can indicate the grants for which they would need access, and Grant Solutions should be able to connect them, grant them access to those grants. But if you have trouble, or if, after you've submitted that access request, the person has access to Grant Solutions, if they still are having trouble accessing their grant, email us at the rosph@hud.gov inbox, and we can help you just talk through how to make sure that person has access to the grants. All right, case management software again. So I want to spend a little bit more time just again emphasizing that this is a great resource for you. In addition to all the wonderful benefits that your colleagues have shared on the line in the chat, the case management software just really offers a lot of great benefits to help you track those individual participant services and outcomes, help you track it in real time, and help you submit those reports. So there's multiple options available to you out there, and you can review those different systems and see which one best meets your needs and satisfies those requirements you need for data privacy, security, cost. Again, this can come from your ROS admin BLI, so you do have funds available to you for this. Case management software has a lot of really great functions beyond what we require in the ROS program. So if you really want to do more in-depth assessments or data collection, it allows you to do that. And I think it could be really powerful and interesting to see, just play in greater depth with your data and see how you can more, how you can just strengthen your program and make it even stronger. The online data collection system, which is the minimum, the tool that's available to you in Grant Solutions, it's just important to emphasize that that's a reporting tool, but it's not a case management tracking system. It doesn't provide the follow-up reminders. It doesn't, show you the progress over time. It's really just a reporting tool. So the case management software does provide value added to you that you don't automatically have in Grant Solutions. And again, the admin budget line item is available to you to use to purchase case management software. What to look for in a data tracking system. So again, look at the cost, make sure that it captures Standards for Success data elements. Does it allow you to track the information you need for your ROS reports? Of course, that's an important question. Does it allow you to generate reports and look at relevant data points? Does it give you a summary, an aggregate summary of how your program is doing. Is it helpful to you, and does it answer questions that you would want to ask of your data? A really important one is, does it provide ongoing technical support? So we know that some case management software programs provide specific technical support as you're uploading reports through Grant Solutions. And so it's important that you consider whether you have that support available to you, as it's really helpful to a lot of our grantees. So let's talk reporting period dates. So each reporting period is no more than 12 months. Your first and your last report is a little bit different because our reporting periods are standardized. They're typically October 1st through September 30th. So whenever your grant term began, many of you, it was June 1st. So the first annual report that you would submit would be data collection from June 1st through September 30th. And then the subsequent years would be that full reporting year of October 1st through September 30th. And an important exception is your final report. Some of the grant agreements have different end dates for when those reports are required, but generally will allow you 90 days after the final report, after the grant term end date to submit that final report. So again, October 30th is the date for those deadlines for your performance reports every year, except for that final report. You may want to check your grant agreement for the exact date, but it's typically 90 days after the grant term end date. All right, and so here we have a visual for you, just kind of showing you what's coming next in terms of those reports that are due. So you can see that it's October 30th for everyone except FY18, who has the final report that's due. And the reporting period will be October 1st through either September 30th or the grant term end date if it's your final report. If you are a Ross FY21 grantee, so you're about to start your new grant term tomorrow, June 1st, then you will be reporting on data collected from June 1st through September 30th. And note that, again, these deadlines are October 30th, except for the final report, which is, in FY18's case, 90 days after the grant term end date. And we will send out these slides after the presentation, and we're also recording the presentation, and we'll upload this to the HUD Exchange page, so you'll have access to this, the slides and the materials that we've covered. So again, we just want to talk about those due dates. October 30th is the big date. That's for the SF425, which goes to your local HUD field office, as well as the performance report, which is through Grant Solutions. Talking about late submissions. So if you submit an annual report that's after October 30th, for those that have the deadline of October 30th, that's considered a late submission. And then if you have the final report, if you submit it after that due date, that's also considered a late submission. And then we mentioned earlier that if you submit a report that has PII, the personally identifiable information, and we send it back to you, and then you make the correction after that report deadline, that's also considered a late submission. So again, really important that those reports that they're de-identified once you submit them. Great, so data quality and availability. I think I saw a question in the chat about the data guide. So we currently have the ROS Data Guide 3.0, which lists data elements available to the ROS program. The new data guide, we're working on that, and it will be coming out soon, but not available yet. So we will certainly let you know once that's available to you. Any data elements that are not in the ROS data guide don't require a response. So if it's something outside of Standards for Success questions, then we don't require that you provide that. Again, take a look at that data guide. It's a really great resource to familiarize with. And it helps you to kind of navigate when to put an A, when to put information not collected. We know that there's different response options. So that's a helpful resource to you to work through. And right, we want to see the different types of services a resident is receiving, particularly within your area of need, but also if you provided a service that falls outside of your area of need and it's something that we collect in our data elements, then we certainly want to hear about that as well. Resources. So we have really great resources I hope that you do check out. We've talked a lot about the data guide, which is available on HUD Exchange. And please note that pretty much all of these are on HUD Exchange. So there's the ROS HUD Exchange page, and that's your home base for all ROS resources. So definitely check that out. That's where you can find the data guide. That's where you can find a lot of great reporting webinars. Last year we had overview and requirements using grant solutions to report. You can see the data dashboard, which we mentioned earlier. That's where the data from your reports is exported, and you can see a lot of really great visuals for services, outcomes, changes over time, data availability. All of that, you can access the link through HUD Exchange. We have a quick reference guide regarding data. The general ROS HUD Exchange page that I'm championing, that link is listed here. And then Standards for Success, that's where those are the data elements that we ask of you to report on. We also have the link there for you to learn more about what that means. Please note that soon we will be opening up our technical assistance provider app will be available to you to provide one-on-one technical assistance with reporting. So stay tuned. That will be coming soon. We're hoping that'll be coming at some point in June. So if you want that tailored one-on-one support, you'll be able to sign up and access that. As I mentioned before, this is the first reporting webinar, but we do have 2 more that are coming to you, one in June, one in July. So definitely stay tuned and please join us for those. And now, Luke, our event producer, if you wouldn't mind closing the recording, and I would love to turn over to some questions and open the floor.